So this morning, I'm going to cover modules, Ruby modules, and what also called mix-ins. And then I'm also going to be covering something called, basically, do a quick overview of functional versus object-oriented programming. So I'm going to start here in my iTerm. I'm going to make a directory called module example. I'm going to cd into module example and open everything in Sublime for right now. My 3 windows open, Google Chrome, Sublime, and then iTerm. I'm going to just create, basically, we'll call this account. Sure, account.rb. So have people heard of modules before, Ruby modules? Or has anyone heard of a module period? Okay, what is in your life, what does a module mean to you? A department, okay.
Usually to do with like schoolwork, like finish this module.
Finish this module, sure. So the formal definition of a Ruby module is not too far off. The formal definition is a grouping of objects under a single name. And you might be wondering, like, that doesn't make any sense, but just remember that a grouping of objects under a single name. And we're going to go into that right now. So in reality, there's 2 ways to use your Ruby modules. The first thing is, like, if you ever want to namespace your classes, you're going to see this today when you deal with bank accounts. So this is when a module is used as a container for objects. So let's say you want to use something like an account class. Like, an account is pretty ambiguous. So what context is this account in? So a way you can get around that is you can call it like a savings account. So let's say that I have a class account. As of right now, this is pretty ambiguous. Account could mean like your electric bill account, your gas bill account, your checking account, your savings account, your brokerage account if you have that. Like, if you wanted to make this very, very specific, you can do a few things. And each one of these has its pluses and minuses. Not one of them is better than the other. So let's say you wanted to make this account into a savings account. You can create an initialize method if you'd like. You can just create a type. If you wanted to do a savings account, you just do a local variable savings. You just do account.new, pass in savings. So this is one way of getting around like the ambiguity of account. You could do this. You could also just do a savings account.new, and which wouldn't take a type anymore. Or if you wanted to do something like a checking account, you could do the same thing. You could pass in a type. You could rename the whole account. These are multiple ways of trying to solve this particular issue. Another one that you may see a little bit, especially with today's bank account challenge, is you could also do something called namespacing. So your class would look a little something like this. Instead of doing like savings account.new, it would just be account : savings.new. And what this is doing is it's namespacing. It's nesting savings underneath the module of account, just for organization purposes. Again, we can do this 3 different ways. If you wanted to accomplish the same thing, you could do account.new and pass in like a string that tells you what type of account it is. You could rewrite the entire class name just to match what you want. Or you can namespace it, which means like I have a mask, like above everything else, there's an account. Specifically under those types of accounts, I have savings, I have checking, and then you would name it like this: account : savings, meaning that savings is more or less like a child that's nested underneath of account. If you were writing the actual class, it would look a little something like this. So again, you want to be as specific with your class names as possible. The name account is a little bit ambiguous. Like if you were writing let's say you were writing property management software. You live in a giant high-rise in downtown Chicago, and they said, I just want like you to create me, like I wanted, as of right now, I just want to charge people's accounts, and you create a class called account. That's totally okay for right now, but what if that that property management company also wanted to move into like managing people's water bills and managing people's electric and internet bills and things like that? All of a sudden, that one small decision that you made right at the very beginning, just say, I'm just going to call it account, because as of right now, all they want is an account just for people to like log in and see things or something like that. That's a little bit of a technical debt you have to pay a little bit later, because the word account is now ambiguous. It's like, are we talking about their account with us as a property management office where they just pay us the rent? Or are we talking about their account which also has their checking account linked to it, or their their water bill, their water account, their PSE&G bill, or their ComEd bill or something like that? You want to be as specific with your class names as possible. And there are a few ways to accomplish that. The first thing you can do is you can just create that generic account class and just say, like, what type of account are you talking about? Am I talking about the savings account, the checking account, the water bill account? The second thing you can do is create like a very, very specific class name, which is the way that I usually go about it. Or the third way, I just wanted to make people aware of this, that this is something that exists, is that you can nest multiple classes underneath an account. So right now we have account, : like which one are you talking about? We can talk about the savings account. We can say, we could be talking about a checking account. You can nest as many classes underneath this module account as you'd like. Maybe I can talk about like water account or something like that. And the way that I would call all of these is just, so you see how a class savings is nested underneath account. So I just do account savings. I do account checking. Then I do account water. This is the way that I would initialize it if I were to name. This is called namespacing. If I were to namespace these particular accounts. So let's kind of take into consideration a brand. Let's say you had something that you would use in real life. So let's say you are talking about gravity. What is the force of gravity on Earth?
9.8.
What's that?
9.8.
9.8. Yes, it's 9.8. Yep, it's 9.8 meters per second, meaning that if you start dropping at a certain height, every second you will get 9.8 meters faster down to the ground. So the longer you're falling, the faster you're going down to the Earth. That's the force of gravity. But this only works in the case of Earth. If you were to talk about like other types of gravity, you'd have to talk about Earth gravity, or you'd have to do like gravity of planet name and something like that, planet name, and then you would have to probably like give it the entire amount. So this is a little bit brittle right now, just like having the class gravity, because it's not really well named. You don't know what you're talking about in terms of like which planet you're talking about. So if you wanted to have different gravity for the moon or for Mars, you wouldn't want to overwrite the same class all the time. You could have it in the same class as methods. So we could do like def Earth gravity, like 9.8. Def moon gravity is 1.6, and def Mars gravity is 3.7. So you could do something like this if you'd like. You can have a class and just have different methods. This is one way of going about it. Or you could organize it a little something like this. So I will have a module gravity instead. And underneath there, I'll have different classes. Earth, for Earth, I might have like the force of gravity equal 9.8. And I'll just kind of repeat this for all the other ones. I have the moon, I have Mars. The way that I would call it, I guess, how would Danny, what's the code I would type in order to initialize each individual class under namespaced underneath this module? All right, I know I have a .new somewhere. Okay, let's say I want to initialize, I want to create a new instance of the moon gravity. How would I type that?
Gravity.moon.
Gravity.moon, like this? Close, look on 43.
You have to do gravity, colon,
Yep.
moon.
Yep. So again, this is just an organization pattern. I am like, because the class gravity is just so ambiguous, or the class account is just so ambiguous, this is one way to battle that ambiguity. You surround everything with a module, and then everything, all your classes, you can't just call like moon.new because it's nested underneath this module gravity. So you just do gravity : moon.new. Again, this is not an especially common practice, but you will see it in today's challenges. You may see it at your first job. Like when I first showed up, I was like, what the heck is this : thing? And I wish that someone had told me. So we threw it in with this curriculum. So this is one way to use modules. A module, again, is just, the formal definition is a grouping of objects under a single name. So I have all these different classes that make objects under a specific name called gravity.
Are there any inheritance issues, like with all the classes inheriting?
It's not inheriting from the module, it's just namespaced under the module. So it's kind of like you can kind of think of this as what's a good real life example? Let's say you are a.
It's just a way to organize that.
It's just a way to organize. So in a sense, it's kind of like I have, like going back to the example of like inheritance from yesterday. Like I am an American, I have an American passport, right? So I'm like nested underneath like the American passport of the U.S. government, but at the same time, like I personally can inherit stuff from my parents. So it's kind of like the U.S. government and myself don't really have too much of a relationship. I'm just like part of that, but like all of my attributes and things like that I can inherit from other places. So this one, if you wanted to inherit from planet, are you saying would this work?
Yeah,
it does. Yeah. This is just the gravity to surround all of this is basically to say, like, let's just organize these people together, because there are, Chinese people who aren't Americans, right? And then they would be under the module of China or something like that. So this is one way of using modules. It's not an especially common way of using it. Another one is it's called a mix-in. So I'm going to create a module. Let's do so a mix. Okay. So the other way we can use modules is what's called a mix-in, and what that is, it's basically a collection of reusable code that doesn't have any dependencies. The key word is does not have any dependencies. For instance, there's like all these methods and abilities that all teenagers have once they reach teenage years. It's not built into all humans, but it's mixed in independently. So let's create a person class. We'll call this person.rb. We'll call this class person. I messed up. There we go. And then we'll create a teenager module to mix into this class. So when I create a person, what are some attributes of that person? Name. I'll say first name, and then give me one other thing, something that all human beings have in terms of like an adjective, and an age. All right, I will just do at first name equals first name, and at age equals age. What are all people able to do, verb-wise?
Breathe.
Breathe. I am taking a deep breath. Michael, what else can what else can all?
We can work and study.
You can work and study. Work and study. I am studying hard to get a good job. So this is something that all people are able to do. So if I just did P equals, let's do person equals capital P person.new. I'll call this Bob, and Bob is 37. I did P person.breathe and P person.work and study. All right, so when I run Ruby person, I am taking a deep breath and I am studying hard to get a good job. And this kind of makes sense. So I have a class person here. This class, every single person has a first name and an age. They can take deep breaths. They can work and study. They can tell you about themselves. Tell me about self. My name is blah, and I am age years old. Just add that down here. Run it real quick, just make sure it works. Undefined method, first name. I'm missing some. This is broken. Tell me about yourself. So let's read this error message. It says, on person line 16, there's an undefined local variable or method first name. Okay, so line 16, first name is not defined. Anyone see what's missing?
At first name, A.
I could do it at first name, or I could do something else.
Add a reader.
Add a reader, yeah. And I'll also throw an age in there because I see that to be an issue as well. Let's just verify that this works. All right. So this looks pretty good to me, but I want to create a teenager module. So we're going to have some fun with this one. Teenager.rb. I'm going to create a module called teenager. And this is the other way that we use modules. One of them is to namespace all of our classes. The other one is just to create a bunch of reusable code that doesn't have any dependencies. So it can't rely on any sort of variables. It can't rely on other classes. It's just a bunch of methods. So what are things that teenagers can do that people usually don't do? Come on, subtract 20, 30 years from your life.
They can sit in weird ways in public, like this. And,
sit in weird ways. All right. I am taking up way too much room, and I'm taking up way too much room. Sure. So they sit in weird ways. This is true. If you ever go on the bus and you have a bunch of teenagers, like they're just like sprawled out in strange ways. What are other things that all teenagers can do that people, normal humans, don't really do?
Horseplay.
What's that?
Horseplay.
Oh, that's
Yeah, we never do that.
yeah. I am horseplaying. Just give me one more. What's that? They get passes all the time. It is okay. You are just teenager. These are things that teenagers can do that usual like adult people don't usually do. So they sit in very strange ways. It is true. Like I thought it was really cool when I like stuck up my foot on a desk or like sat in strange ways. Yes, you do horseplay a lot when you're a teenager, and you get a lot of passes, like a lot of passes when you're a teenager. So let's say that right now we're dealing with Bob, and Bob is 37 years old. So Bob does not sit in weird ways, horseplay, or get any passes because Bob is 37. So let's call this. I'm going to create this person named Bob. I'm going to create a new person called John, and I'm going to do person.new, and I'm going to make myself John, and let's say I'm 15 years old. What you can do at this point is literally, because John is 15 years old and you feel like you want to give the ability for this class person to do a bunch of things like teenagers, I can just do one thing. I'm just going to do include teenager, and I'm going to require relative for teenager. This require relative, I'm requiring another local file to be brought in for this particular file. And this include teenager on line 4 with a capital T basically says, I'm going to go inside the teenager file, find the module called teenager, and include all of those methods in here. So this person can still do all of these things like breathe and all that. They also have special abilities for them. They have the ability to pjohn dot sit in weird ways. They can also horseplay and get passes. So again, it's that idea that I don't need to type in all of the methods inside of this class. Similar, like yesterday, we had methods that were available to us because we were inheriting from a parent class. Here, all I'm doing is I'm including a module called teenager. This is a bunch of reusable code that doesn't have any dependencies. And what that means is if you look inside of each one of these methods, it doesn't depend on anything. It can literally just operate on its own. And right now I'm just returning simple strings. But if I were to make this a double quote, I'm taking way too much room because I am age years old. This no longer works. This will work, but you want to avoid doing stuff like this, because if I include teenager in another class that's not person that doesn't have the ability to access an age, this will break. Does that kind of make sense? You don't want to have any sort of dependencies inside of here. This should operate 100% of the time without relying on variables. So you want to be careful with stuff like this. Oh, I am taking up way too much room. So let's just kind of see if this works first. I'm going to do Ruby person. I'm just taking a deep breath on all this and all this kind of stuff. So even though, obviously you can see that it operates correctly. I have all of these, the ability to sit in weird ways and horseplay and get passes because I included this module called teenager. If I took this line out, I run it again, loads up, it says sit in weird ways is not defined. It's not a real method because I'm not including the entire module in here. This is basically saying I have a bunch of reusable code, so grab this and copy and paste it in here.
So this is like basically if you have not created a separate class teenager, added the person's character.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Like, oh, should I make a teenager?
Yeah.
Why make a teenager?
Sure. Yeah. So the question was, this is an alternative. The question was like, if this is line 4 is basically an alternative to creating a teenager and that having that teenager inherit from person. If you wanted to do it that way, it looks a little something like this. Teenager part 2, RB. It would look like class teenager, which would inherit from person. And then I would just grab all of this code and throw it in here.
So is it just preference at that point?
Yeah, it's just preference at this point. Teenager.new. And I just do all of this stuff down here. Uninitialized constant person. Well, that would be good if I require relative for person. Teenager part 2, line 3. Teenager is not a class. Did I spell it wrong? Person, let's comment all this out. Teenager is not a class. Initialize wrong number of arguments. Because I'm inheriting from person, I need to go up to their initialize. So I will pass in a new name, John, and I am 15. There we go. So yeah, this is just two ways of doing the exact same thing. You could create a class that inherits from person. It's totally a legitimate way to go. Or you can create a module called teenager, which basically is just a collection, it's basically a file with a bunch of methods inside of it that allow you to, that give you specific,
Technically, you can go both. You can go ways with the module. You can't with the class. Right?
You can go both ways with the module, but you can't go both ways with the class. What do you mean by that?
I mean that if you want to go from the top down with a module, you can, but you cannot go from the top down with the class.
I just did. I had a teenager and I inherited from person.
Yeah,
So all of the things here I was able to use here.
Okay, but you weren't able to go into person and go and take get passes. Person can't just automatically get passes, right?
No, because that's what happened when I took away the include teenager and this line right here. Like this person no longer has the ability to get passes at all. But if I were to mix in include teenager, this person also has the ability to grab all of the teenager methods.
Does include only work with modules?
Include only works with modules, yep.
Okay.
So again, there's two ways to use Ruby modules. One of them is I'm going to create a module, have a bunch of methods that I know I'm going to use between different classes. Because I guess teenager is not like the greatest one to use here, because this could also apply to elderly folks. Like they can sit in weird ways. They can sit whatever way you want. You're going to respect your elders. They can horseplay all they want. They could get passes because they're older. Like this doesn't necessarily just apply to teenagers. So I could just call this like you could call this like something different and include it for different classes of people. So it's kind of like if I had a class person and I had a class elderly person, I can also include all these teenager module methods in there. So that's one use of modules. It's a reusable set of code with no dependencies that you can put in any class. This also applies to animals, like in any way. Like your dog can sit in weird ways and horseplay and get passes because it's a cute dog. And a cat also has the same thing. So you might want to name this something different. But I'm saying like I can use these exact same three pieces of code, these three methods of code without retyping it in 4 different classes. This applies to all cute animals and cute anything, and teenagers and elderly people. So I don't have to type these 3 methods over and over. I just need to include teenager and I have access to these methods.
Hey, John, I have a question.
Sure.
So how does that work with, like if you have a person who isn't a teenager and you don't want that individual instance to be able to use that include statement?
All right. So yeah, the question, if I understand it correctly, is as of right now, every single person has the ability to act like a teenager. And how do you limit it to basically how do you limit it so that only people of a certain age are teenagers? Is that right?
That's it.
Yeah. That's a good question. As of right now, every single person has the ability to be a teenager, no matter what. There's no way that I can prevent them from doing that because this include basically says, this include is literally just shorthand for copy this, get rid of this, and throw it at the bottom. So that every single person, unfortunately, as of right now, has the ability to be a teenager.
Can you go over private?
Sure. Actually, it's actually an interesting one. So Leanna, the answer to your question is you cannot. Like once you include teenager, this entire class has the ability to do all of these things.
If you do include teenager ages necessarily.
I don't believe that to be the case.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, like the question was, can I do like include teenager if age is greater than or equal to 19, less than? Yeah, this is not good. Like it would be cool if you could do this, but you can't. So another thing that I was just asked is, can you go over public and private methods? And I think this might work a little bit better in this account class. So every single savings account has an account number and an amount. So add account number equals account number, and add amount, oops, amount. So there are public-facing things, like in terms of what are things that you are able to do as a consumer going to your savings account. What are you able to do? View balance, which just will return me my amount. What else?
Deposit or withdraw.
Deposit, and then you're going to give me an amount, right? Add amount plus equals amount. I'll just do deposit amount just to make it a little. And you can withdraw. Let's just go with those three things for now. So withdraw. Withdrawal amount. Just verify that all of these things work. So I'll just call this John savings account. And savings account dot new, and I'll do account number of 123, and I have $5 million. All right, it's okay to dream. Why not? I'll keep these both as integers. So if I do p dot John savings dot view balance, and then I just do John savings dot deposit $1 million. That's 100,000. All right, fine. Well, I'll deposit 100,000. I'll print the balance one more time, and then I will withdraw $200,000, and then print the balance one more time as well. Is everyone following me so far in terms of how I created this class and all the things I'm doing? Let's just run Ruby account.rb, and it says I started off with 5 million. I added one. Wait. Oh, I deposited twice. My bad. I started with 5 million. I added 100,000, and then I subtracted 200,000. Now my balance is 490,000. So this is an example of like these are things that are publicly available. Other people should be able to like do this stuff to your savings account. But there's a bunch of private methods that only the bank can do. The bank can completely override your amount, right? They can just reset amount. You could do that, but it's kind of like if they like you cannot go in and say like, oh, there's like fraudulent activity on my thing, and they're like, oh, let me put that money back into your account, right? Like that's not something you can do because if you then we just like money wouldn't be real at that point, pretty much. So they can like basically reset your amount to like any sort of new amount. What else can they do that you can't do publicly?
Freeze your account, or maybe that's the same thing. They can put charges on your account.
Yeah, they could put charges on your account that like you might not put on yourself, right? Put charges on account. Let's see what happens when I do reset reimburse for fraud. And I'll just do fraud amount. I'll just do that amount plus equals fraud amount. Let's just do 1 for now. Everyone agrees, like a bank on the internal side can reimburse for fraud, but you cannot reimburse for fraud. I can't call that publicly. So I've done all of these things. I'm going to put just a bunch of stars to separate. I'm just going to do P. I'm going to just do John.reimburse for fraud 12 million. I got taken for $12 million. Like this is something I should not be able to do. Let's watch what happens when I put everything under private. I get 5, all the same things as before. This is my little put statement just to separate it out a little bit. And it says undefined local variable or method John, John's savings. Boom, it says private method reimburse for fraud called for savings account. What this means is a private method is a method that's only available within the class. So within this class, I can call reimburse for fraud, but as an outside person, I cannot call reimburse for fraud. I was able to call initialize, view balance, deposit, withdraw, but I cannot call this one publicly because it's not a public method. Everything underneath the private is a private method. You can't call that outside of the class. So it's like I can't just externally call, like I was able to externally call withdraw and deposit because those are things you're supposed to be able to do. I cannot, however, do John's savings reimburse for fraud because that's not something that's publicly available. Only a banker can do that.
So if I was like,
in order to call this, I would have to say like, help fraud. I am a victim. Something like that. Help, I am a victim. I'll just do, but how much did you get taken for? And then I'll just do fraud amount equals gets.chomp. And then I'll just do, I'll reimburse them. So I'll just I will reimburse for fraud amount. And I will print out the balance. That makes sense? I'm going to call the method, like this is the way that you would do it if you were a victim of fraud. You call somebody on the phone, hi, I'm a victim of credit card theft or something like that, and I have all these different charges, and they're like, okay, how much were you taken for? Like, is this charge yours? Is this charge yours? Is this charge yours? They'll find out that amount from you, then they will reimburse for fraud on their end. Like they are able to do that. And then from there, it will reimburse you, and then you'll view the balance. So I can't call reimburse for fraud. That's not a thing, but I can do help, I am a victim on this. So it goes all the way through. Here's my little thing to separate. How much did you get taken for? I got taken for 50 bucks. Ooh, something happened. String cannot be coerced into integer on line 31. Line 31, string cannot be coerced into integer. When I do gets.chomp, what is the output? Like, it's a string. So I'll just do string.2i. Try one more time. So my current account balance, like you said, is this much. And let's
do more than 50 this time.
All right, let's do 200,000.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. And nothing is coming out. Let's do P, John. I am help, I am a victim. Right, 200,000. And now I'm back to 510. 5.1.
Real quick, can you go back to the code? Why aren't we able to call rebalance in the instance method?
So view balance only returns it out like this. You would have to do a puts in front of amount in order for it to run every single time. I just threw a P in the front.
My fault. I thought that was going.
Cool. All right. So last thing I wanted to cover in the next 7 minutes is something called functional versus OOP.RB. And then Chris will come in, and then we'll take a quick break, and then Chris will come in. I'll get him set up. So I want to talk about functional versus object-oriented programming, because it might come up during an interview. I just kind of wanted to give people an idea of like the difference. So functional programming and object-oriented programming, these are two different methodologies to write code, but in the end, we'll both do the exact same thing. So when you write code, you're primarily concerned about two things. One is data, and two is behaviors, like what methods are available, what functions are available that will do stuff to your data. In object-oriented programming, you have all of your data and all your behaviors in one class so that when you read it, you know exactly how it works upon like a really quick glance. And in functional programming, you don't have it all in one place. Data and behavior are different, and they're kept apart for separate reading. Object-oriented programming often has more lines of functional programming, but you might be wondering, like, when do I use each one? It depends. If you're doing a lot of stuff and you need to think with data in terms of like real-life scenarios, you would just use object-oriented programming. If you're using functional programming, you're thinking just like, what procedures do I need to take? So there's a great article that I'm going to share with you in just a little bit. But let's say that we wanted to let's say we want to organize employees. If we're doing things in object-oriented programming, which is what we've been doing for a while, let's just we initialize each employee with a name and a salary. As you can see, I probably shouldn't use name because it turned up as blue. I'll just do first name. I'll just do full name. I'll just do first name. All right, let's do def change. I'm just going to copy this. We have a very, very basic class here. We have a class employee. When you create a new employee, they have a first name and a salary. And then from there, you can just kind of go first name. What's first name? And I'll make these all adder readers. So you create a new person. So I'll just do, just go Mike equals employee.new with Mike. And Mike makes 100,000. I can change Mike's salary. I can give a description of Mike. Let's just kind of go with that. Let's just do Mike.description. I'm going to change Mike's salary by negative 20,000. Sorry, Mike. I'm going to put Mike's description one more time. Let's list everything. I'll just run functional versus OOP. So Mike makes 100,000 to start off, and now Mike makes 80,000. So this is our class. We can create many, many new objects with it. If I wanted to like reuse this over and over again, this is like reusable bits of code. So let's say I created a bunch of, let's say that I have more employees than just Mike. So I have an employees array with 2 employees in there. One's named Bob and one name's Jane. And Bob makes 100,000, Jane makes 125,000. And I want to give each one of these people raises. How do I type? I guess what do I type? I do employees.each do employee. So this is an each loop. I'm iterating over each one. I'm just going to do employee.change salary, and I'm going to change it by $10,000. It's a good year for us. And then after I do that, I want to have them print out their description. So I'll do it again. Actually, I could just do it in one thing. Puts employee.description. I'll just do puts before employee description. Everyone is getting a raise. I'll just do an after. Does this make sense to everyone? Like, this is object-oriented programming. What we're used to. We have a reusable class. We created 2 employees. We're going to iterate over each one of the employees. Before, this is everyone's money, and then afterwards, everyone's going to get a raise. Let's go with real people here. We're going to have Mike is making 100,000, and we're going to have Aaron make 125. Why not? I like it. Big money right here. Everyone's getting $10,000 raise. Let's see if this works. All right, before Mike makes 100,000, everyone's getting a raise. After Mike makes 110, before Aaron is making 125, everyone's getting a raise, and then 135. So this is the way that we do things in terms of object-oriented program. We think of things as full objects, and we can change salaries on those objects. We can give descriptions of those particular objects. But if you were to do this using functional programming, I will separate this. I'll just call this functional.rb. On the left, we have object-oriented. On the right, we will have functional. They're going to accomplish the exact same thing. We're going to do Mike, Aaron. Get rid of all these dot zeros for now. Clean this up a little bit. So as of right now, you can kind of see like we don't have objects anymore. Before we had objects like 19 and 20, people were nested underneath objects, and now we just have a simple array of information. Now, what's going to happen here is I'm going to have a function called change salaries. This is going to take in a bunch of employees and the amount that you're going to change them by. All right, everyone's getting less money now.
Bipolar salary.
Yeah.
It's like a bipolar salary.
It is, yes.
It's all over the place.
See if this works real quick before I explain it.
But the salary change.
Yes. Just see if this works. Before makes, everyone's getting a pay decrease. Now he makes, okay. So what I've done on the right side is done the same thing I've done on the left. So this is printing out what we expect in an object-oriented manner. These particular objects have attributes and they have methods on them. So it's like it's able to change salary, and I just know that this employee has the ability to change salary. This employee object knows how to change salary. But if we look here on the right side, this is what's called functional programming. You don't have any reusable anything. Let's put that's not correct. You don't have reusable instances of classes, and those classes have behaviors about them. Like you literally have to tell it exactly what to do. So I have employees right here. I'm going to move this all the way to the top, and it's just an array of arrays with information. First thing appears to be a name, and the last thing appears to be your salary. And I have change salaries, which is just a method, takes in an array of employees and the amount that you want to change them. And I'm literally iterating over the same thing, but instead of doing like employee dot description, or employee dot like salary or whatever, I just have to access it and tell it literally what to do. So before employee, which is the first array, 0, it's going to say before Mike makes employee 1, which is this thing right here. Everyone is getting a pay decrease, and then afterwards the same thing. Employee 0, which is Mike, makes employee 1 100,000 plus the amount that I'm going to change. Two ways of doing the exact same thing. There's no right or wrong. You can kind of say this is way shorter than this. Like there's so much less code over here than there is on this side. They both have their place. What's going on, Chris? How are you? But they both have their place. I personally am a fan of object-oriented versus functional, but they both have their place. But I just kind of want to give it a quick example of the differences of what functional versus object-oriented look like. Any questions from anyone before we take a break? All right.